Welcome, Bitcoiners. We are back on the farm. Good morning, B for victory. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Twadug Yo-Yo. Good morning, P-Man. Buenos dias all, indeed. B for victory with the news. U.S. Senator Warren, Bitcoin and crypto needs to shut down because it's funding fentanyl trade. That was a pretty good one. It was in the running for Moscow time, but we're going to talk about her substantively. Now, I got to give you all a warning. I'm not sure how this broadcast is going to go. The Starlink here has been very sketchy all morning and has been dropping 100 times. I've had to replug it, reboot it, But we're going to do our best because there's so much going on. We got to talk about it, right? And in case you didn't know, the sun is up. I'll give you a little look over there and you can see the sun rising. I'm not going to bend it too much, but the mountains are still there. The sun is up, right? All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Oh, I forgot to confirm Bitcoin is running. It's an unofficial first sip. We got to start it over. We got to do it the right way. The sun is up and Bitcoin's running, so we can have our coffee. So, as you know, we like to start every morning off. The board is back, but we don't have a board this morning. But the board's back, Bitcoin. The board is back, Bitcoin Graffiti. We're back. We're back on the farm, man. We missed it so much. You can still see I got a little, sometimes yellow. I have trouble finding yellow in the whiteboard markers. So I have to use the Crayola colored washable markers, but you actually have to wash them off. And if you don't, it will stain. So, but it comes off eventually. But I got a bit of a stain from when I left and the last time I used it here. So, but indeed, we missed the morning, right? We missed the board. I mean, we missed the board. We love the board. Maybe I'll bring this board with me back to Montreal. I think we should ban Americans from using the currency that accounts for over 90% of the illicit transactions. It's basic biology. Yeah, that argument, we've been using it for years, and it always gets the same like stunned look on the face of any regulator. I've said that in front of politicians and regulators before, and it just doesn't compute. The brain will not allow it to like enter the brain and make a synaptic connection. You just say it, and then they're like, "What? Criminals, dollars, what?" And certainly we probably will have a pretty good Moscow time out of it one day. But for now, we're left with the following. So, we talk, I'm here in the country, but I got to be careful because I came to the country. And according to the news, leaving the city for suburban life could trigger depression, according to science and researchers. So I got to be careful about spending too much time out here because it's even worse than the suburbs. Let me tell you, it's that far from the city. Here's another one. So this is from MSNBC. And, because before, when people protested during the 2020 BLM protests, right, the worst thing you could do, the worst thing that was done was geofencing and the dragnet. You know what geofencing is, which is your cell phone is there and we know where you are. So therefore you were near a crime that was committed. So therefore you committed the crime. Very terrible metrics, by the way. Even that movie 2000 Mules or 1000 Mules or whatever it was, the one that Dinesh D'Souza used or created, he put some geofencing stuff in there. It's very unreliable, right? Very unreliable. So that movie, by the way, the 2000 Mules, however many mules, probably, I'm not saying it's true or not, but mostly entertainment, right? It looks like it was debunked several times. Now, we're not saying the election stuff was debunked, right? And that's not what we're saying. We're just saying the movie should be seen as a form of entertainment and not as fact, as some people tend to cite that movie as like fact, not fact. But if you remember a million articles written in the summer of 2020, don't do geofencing. No, don't do it. Well, they have a different take here, this time. And this is from MSNBC. Dragnet search warrants are creepy, But this January 6th challenge falls flat. A federal judge rejected a January 6th defendant challenge to geofence location warrant, but the novel issue is an important one to watch. So the whole argument here was that because you can't, because there's nothing around the state buildings in DC and the mall, there's no other stores you could go to. So there was no mistaking where you were. That's what the judge said. Well, there's nothing else around. What else could you be doing? We therefore can geofence. It's too sparsely populated. So I do indeed wonder if that's why people are worried about depression when you go to the countryside, because you can no longer just say, well, I didn't know, I wasn't near the thing, right? You're in the country, they know where you are. Maybe, but remember, I'm not supposed to add punchlines to these are just supposed to live on their own. And indeed, if you stop and think about, these are some terrible things, right? You get the idea of geofencing put on top of, and by the way, the geofencing case, the guy they went after, Stuart Rhodes, for this, ended up getting 18 years. 18 years in prison. It's not funny. He got 18 years in prison. I'm laughing because it's insane. He got 18 years in prison because of the geofence thing that said he was in the Capitol. And Cernovich writes this. Stalin sent political prisoners, one second. One second, I gotta deal with this vacuuming. Hold on. So, Cernovich says this. Stalin sent political prisoners to gulags after a show trial before regime stooges. The usual bid was 5 to 10 years. Stuart Rhodes got 18 years, and he'll probably be tuned up in a level 5 supermax when no one is looking. We saw the Soviet Union as monstrous. Here we are now. And indeed, it's hard not to think that way, right? It's hard not to say, Jesus, America is throwing people in jail. There's political prisoners. And it looks like there are political prisoners. And, right, we can't trust the media. They're just going to lie to you about absolutely everything. So where are we left, right? We've got these days, a journalist was trying to ask one of the military defense spokespeople, John Kirby, in the White House press room about the Hunter Biden thing, and he laughed it off. He's like, come on. What are you talking about, right? Which infuriates people because they're not asking any questions. And then you hear all of these other things just about the pervasiveness of the runaway power of the U.S. state and trying to impose their will on foreign countries and all of that kind of stuff, right? We all see what's going on. Balaji brings the following point up, though, just to counteract worry about the decrepit nature of the United States and the global order they created after World War II. And this is what he says. He says, how multipolarity legalizes technology in 3 steps. 1, the West no longer controls the world. 2, so it no longer regulates the world. And 3, so anyone in the world can innovate. Now, he's talking about this in terms of a bill that was, or a commercial use case in the UAE, talking about a large source, open AI model, no royalties connected, blah, 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 and how important this innovation was. There's another thing that happened along these lines in Japan yesterday as well, where Japan has opened the door to these kinds of things. So the point he's making here, though, is that the U.S. establishment, right, saying that they can control the world and then saying they can regulate the world, right? Well, what about the control part? Just look at what happened the other day and look at what's going on in general in Ukraine just for a second, right? So we saw the United States threaten, we saw the U.S. threaten the, one second, I got to get to my pictures here. We saw the U.S. threaten, threaten not threaten so much or exaggerate the amount of success they were happening. We've been tracking that story about Bakhmut, how the talking points changed over the last year, right? Critical. When Zelensky came to America, everything rests on Bakhmut. We need money, we need things. And then all of a sudden, when they lose Bakhmut, it's not that big of a deal. And remember, we're not here to give you specifics about Ukraine and Russia and what's going on in the war. 99% of it is bullshit. We say that every single time. This is not a resource for specific happenings in Ukraine, and Russia simply can't get through the veil and the fog of war. But sometimes things come through, and I'll mention who I think has some good takes. And indeed, right, just the idea of America controlling, they threatened for a long time. Now they got the F-16s coming. We saw a drone attack on Moscow the other day. We saw Putin say he's going to escalate things, and last night he sent ballistic missiles into Kiev. That looks true, right? That looks absolutely true. So right away, America's ability to sort of flex over there and use this proxy war to show off its own military capacity coming up against a limit here, right? We're starting to see the limit. No answer last night. None of the Patriot missiles that would normally be used, none of the Iron Dome, which they have there, was capable of stopping the attack last night. So it was only 3 missiles or something like that. It wasn't a huge amount, but they struck their targets. War Clandestine brings up the following. He says, I'm observing a broader acceptance of the reality of the war in Ukraine. The aftermath of Bakhmut really put things into perspective. More people are realizing that Ukraine is losing and the US lied about ... everything. The Ukraine-America propaganda machine failed. Truth is prevailing. And the truth is that America's capacity to control these places is just not what it was 80 years ago. They can't go around the world and run these proxy wars as efficiently as they once did. The playing field militarily looks more and more leveled simply because of the new types of weapons that are out there. We've talked a lot about the neutralization of tanks due to the drone stuff, and that works both ways, right? It works both for the United States sending those drones over, but we've seen already the drone technology efficiently stolen by the Iranians who have been selling them to the Russians. We've seen drone parts coming out of China who've been supplying Russia with drone parts. Now, we don't have proof of that. These are all just still rumors that you hear in between the lines, but it looks like it's happening, right? If a thing can happen and can't get caught, you can pretty much guarantee it is happening. So there is this notion that the political prisoners peace is the political prisoners peace combined with what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia means that, look, the control itself is being lost, and the ability to push for smaller appearances of control are becoming more and more pervasive. So that's why I see those two things linked. And if you think more about what Balaji is saying, right, this idea, first of all, that they can't control, but then go to the second point of his logic. They can't control, then they can't regulate. If they can't control, they can't regulate. So that's why you're seeing, people tossed in jail to set an example, because that's sort of the best thing they can do instead of actually getting real laws in there. And even this idea of the efficiency of the bureaucratic machine. So here's what he says. Here's what Balaji says about that, right? The collapse of state capacity to even regulate it in the first place is going to become more and more obvious in the next days, weeks, and months, not even years, days, weeks, and months. And he says just this idea that the state is so competent and surgical that it can ban X and permit Y, we're going to ban that, but this is okay, as if Elizabeth Warren and these people have the ability, like the skills necessary to do what it is they say they're going to do. So Elizabeth Warren comes out yesterday and says, the fentanyl trade is with Bitcoin, right? Well, you have not been able to shut down one of these fentanyl or with the dollars or with any of it. So how all of a sudden do you think you have the ability to just say, we're going to ban that and we're going to be okay with that and everything's going to be fine? These are incompetent people at the best of times, when the system is actually even tuned and when the engine is running correctly. Even then, they would be hard pressed to do this kind of thing. And now they're saying they have this kind of surgical ability, like it's all just it's all just engineering. It's just an engineering problem, right? Laws are not engineering. When I say something is an engineering problem, it means it's more or less solved, right? If you say something is an engineering problem and it's just about engineers putting their minds to working on something, it's basically solved, right? Engineers will get there. It's not the same as innovation in science and having to come up with a new thing or invent a new thing. And it's certainly not like legislation, right? The legislation is about incentives and tricking humans using the nature by which they are bound as a guide in order to divert that energy into a way that benefits all people. You can't reformulate human beings. We're always going to be a little bit selfish, a little bit greedy, and all of these things. That's what Bitcoin does so well, right? Bitcoin simply admits humans as they are and deals with them as they. It doesn't ask humans to change in order for Bitcoin to run, right? But that's often what these laws are suggesting, and what even just the approach to regulation suggests, that the humans have to get better and then the laws will work, right? The humans need to be better and then the laws will work. Well, that doesn't account for human nature. What you've got to do is build systems that just admit and deal with humans as they are. Bitcoin is the best at that, right? There's nothing even close to being better than that. And even this idea now, and you can see that, right? Just understanding humans as they are and systems as they are to calibrate to those humans. You have this meeting that Joe Biden did with all the AI people, right? All these big science, we're going to regulate AI. We're so strong. We're going to get it this way, and we're going to permit this and not permit that. And the idea of Biden and his czar, the czar of AI, Kamala, she's the czar, right? So the czar of AI, Kamala, and Biden meeting with these innovators and engineers and scientists and all this ends up becoming like a farce. Like, you're going to look back on this in history as one of these examples of sorry, I missed that. Justin had one of the funniest things I've ever said. They were able to stop ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, but they can't stop fentanyl. Very, very strong, Justin. I'm going to copy that. Yeah, they actually just trapped one of my shipments of fembenzenol because my dad's got a bit of the old cancer, and I've been giving him all the good stuff, right? You got to get the ivermectin now from the horses themselves. You go to the horses, right? But it only works, like, you got to take it with the vitamin E and the fenbenzenol, and they actually trapped my fenbenzenol the other day. I got to get another source. It's not that hard, but buggers, huh? So go back to this Biden meeting with tech and AI people. And Balaji says the following: Biden meeting with tech people is the same as Trump meeting with tech people. It's just ceremonial, and it's a legacy of the past. It isn't the centralized 1940s anymore. But the kicker here is that he says the U.S. president is the last to know, not the first. The last to know, not the first. And that's really the truth. In the end, that's it, right? Whether it was Trump or Biden now, these people are as clueless about what's actually going on. Even look at all of Trump's stuff about America and the election that was stolen. All true, right? And these are, like, he's now promised, I don't know why he didn't do it before, but he's promised full pardons for all these people for January 6th. Don't worry about it. But just as Cernovich has been criticizing him for a long time, he's treating this whole thing like it's a boomer Woodstock. It's like, we're going to save America. We're going to get it back because of the elections, and they stole the elections and democracy and blah, 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 blah. Let it rot. Let it rot. We're not going to go save it, right? It's like, even if the next election is as big of a scam as before, remember, I was happy that it was stolen from Kerry Lake in Arizona. That was the best case scenario, that Katie Hobbs, who is as idiotic sounding as Kamala Harris, like, if you put them in a conversation, you would be, you'd be dealing with two of the dimmest lights in American culture. And that we have them both in these positions, and that it can actually happen where they have a conversation and we can all be bored out of our minds and laughing at the substance abuse. And not that it's funny. You don't want to laugh. It's, you know, it is sad. I don't want to laugh at substance abuse necessarily. But in this context, what are you supposed to do? Like, what, you know, the AI czar is a drunk. She's a drunk, right? Now, I don't have proof. I don't want to diagnose people from the outside, but that's what it looks like to me. So we're dealing with incompetent people, and asking this collection of incompetent people to get better is just not admitting human nature, right? They're not going to. We have to look to other things. And so Balaji came up with this formula, and it makes a lot of sense. And think about already the success we've had in the following way. Just look at media, state media, all that's going on with Twitter and the peer-to-peer system. We've said for a long time that Bitcoiners have adopted the peer-to-peer model for news, just as we've adopted it for the flow of money, right? So that's what part of what we do here in the morning is. We get together and we just talk about the news in order to filter it in a way that makes sense to our social group. And so Balaji makes the argument that social groups are going to be the more important organizing principle versus nation states. And indeed, nation states as an organizing principle was only really a thing in the last few hundred years. It's never how we've organized ourselves before. We always did it in different communities. Why do you think Europe was called Christendom for most of its history? It was a Christian series of kingdoms, and they were really small and some were big, and they were mostly geographically specific, but that's what it was called. It wasn't called Europa or any of these things when it thought about itself. It called itself Christendom, right? Because it was a social group of Christians that created these kingdoms and had that much in common. And Bitcoiners do the same. Think about this story that we're getting more traction on. Remember and this relates directly to the media. Everyone remembers that ridiculous fake news New York Times hit piece on Bitcoin mining. And Pierre Rochard, for example, had one of the funniest response jokes ever, where he did some science with the carbon meter, and we loved it. It was hilarious. But remember what people did. They noticed that the New York Times cover photo of that story was doctored. It was a fake picture to make it look like it was hazy, and there was a ton of humidity. And of course, the autist Bitcoiners, the weaponized autist Bitcoiners, sat there and said, wait a minute, let's look in the weather history of the day this picture was supposedly taken. Like, how many hazy days actually exist in this part of Texas? So they started doing the math and the chances of a hazy day like that at the time the picture was taken, and blah, blah, blah. Who knows? They did all the things, and they found out it was absolutely impossible. The picture was definitely doctored. They looked at a different forensic identification for that picture being doctored. But yesterday in Bitcoin Magazine, we ran the following story by Level 39, right? In his latest article, Level 39 discusses allegations of manipulation by the New York Times regarding their coverage of the Bitcoin mining operation in Texas. The article highlights a video released by the New York Times in 2021, which showed a mining facility in China. The video depicted a hazy environment, suggesting that Bitcoin mining is harmful to the environment. However, the article raises concerns about the authenticity of the footage, suggesting that it may have been staged or manipulated to create a negative perception of Bitcoin mining. It points out several inconsistencies and suspicious elements in the video, including inconsistencies in the visuals, as well as questionable editing choices. Questionable editing choices. The article also references statements from individuals who claim to have visited similar mining facilities and found them to be significantly cleaner than what was portrayed in the New York Times video. While the article doesn't definitively prove manipulation or staging, it raises doubts about the accuracy and objectivity of New York Times coverage of Bitcoin mining. It encourages readers to question the motives and potential biases of media organizations when it comes to reporting on emerging tech like Bitcoin. So here's an example of a social group being way more efficient, admitting human nature, and helping a bunch of like-minded humans navigate what otherwise would be a perilous pit of lies and deception and manipulations. So right away, the only real protection we have against this form of brainwashing is social groups. I mean, that's what will do it, right? We can see socializing in a group, all of the cognitive needs to get over this stuff is what we're doing, right? That's what we have a history of doing successfully. And when you add to that the when you add to that the things that we've seen now in Twitter and the amount of conversations that have happened there, we've seen the P2P network. Remember, Bitcoiners survived on Twitter. They were one of the only groups that made it through the purges and the gulags and the people were getting ostracized, kicked out. What is it? What do you call it when you kick people out again? I can't remember. So all of that stuff, right? That happened. Somehow Bitcoiners, because they were not politically involved necessarily, you can't really put a Bitcoiner into a right wing or a left wing camp, although they definitely are, the footprint is larger in part of the right wing camp, let's say, but I don't even know if that's accurate. But because of that, because Bitcoiners were sort of off on their own, they didn't get caught up in the different types of government motivated purges. Now, some of them were banned. Yeah, banned is not really the word, boo-boo. Exiled. That's the word I'm looking for. Exiled, right? A lot of people were exiled from Twitter who have come back now. They've been respawned, which is funny, right? It's funny to see all these exiled people come back. So because this was going on and because there were Bitcoiners, right? We saw especially the political Bitcoiners were kicked out. They were exiled. They came back. But more importantly, Bitcoin remained, whether just a hump or not, an important conversational component to Twitter itself. And because it was such an important thing and survived and was there for the respawn, we've been able to create our little corner on Twitter, which has helped us be a little ahead of the curve in how to use Twitter to be effective news gathering source. Maybe we were more clued into that than others were who were purely in the political realm. So yesterday, Elon Musk did an interview with the Babylon Bee, and obviously on Twitter, and he came up with a lot of interesting things. The Babylon Bee published a Twitter thread about it, which was really interesting. And first of all, he says, I'm here for the argument, right? So he says, like, I want to argue, like, enough of this not arguing, enough of this everyone being so in agreement about things, and if you're not in agreement, you got to leave the platform. So that was a pretty interesting thing he said. They joked about NPR, right? How are you supposed to stay informed if NPR is no longer there? And Elon's like, I didn't even know they were really on Twitter to begin with until they made a fuss because we kicked them out, right? Which is funny because it's true. Who's ever seen an NPR tweet, right? Nobody. Enmity, I missed if you did you cover the garlic being? No, we did not. Sorry, Enmity, but we do eat a lot of garlic. We definitely do eat a lot of garlic. So then he talked a bit about the finances. He laughed off the price that he paid, saying, look, it was outrageously overpriced, but they asked him, do you regret paying? And he's like, absolutely not. It's necessary. And he said the truth. I think what we'll all notice, and you know, we talk a lot about what it will be the iconic photos of World War III in the same way that World War II produced a lot of iconic photos and images and events that we remember for years and were brainwashed with for years. And, you know, I've said Bitcoin Sign Guy, for example, will be seen as an important, monumental image in World War III. And of course, this is what Elon says about him buying Twitter, that he thinks it'll be one of the most important things he'll ever be remembered for, simply because it allowed for this conversation and these conversations to happen, right? And then so he talked a bit about, he apologized to Magneto for comparing him to George Soros. That's pretty good, right? Because everyone is out there saying, oh, you can't criticize George Soros, that's anti-Semitic. And so he apologized to Magneto. So pretty good move. Still talking about some of the hidden censorship that they're finding in Twitter, right? So that was pretty interesting. He did say an interesting thing about Jack, which I think is always important as Bitcoiners, right? Not that we're trying to protect Jack because he's a Bitcoiner. Like that's not, I'm not going to look past Jack Dorsey's faults because he's a Bitcoiner. But I'm also not going to be one of these people who hallucinates that Jack Dorsey is some kind of criminal in bed with the Joe Bidens of the world, right? Like I'm not going that far either. And and I've always, if anything, all I want to do is confirm my own biases that suggested from the beginning. We've said it for months that probably Jack Dorsey had no idea what was going on. In the same way that the president is the last to know, not the first to know, the last to know. The CEOs of many companies are also out of touch. I mean, how many companies is that what people say? Oh, the CEO doesn't know what's going on in this business. Oh, the CEO is so clueless. So there's 99.9% of companies. And Elon Musk was talking about that exact fact. And what he said was, Jack was right that it was impossible to reform Twitter as long as it was a public company. And indeed, Jack Dorsey talked about that many times, right? The ownership structure itself, the way the board worked with the stockholders and all of that stuff meant that Jack had very little control over the company, even though he was the CEO. It just wasn't set up that way, which is why not only was it important that Elon Musk bought it, that he bought it outright and made it a private company in order to do the things he needed to do. And Elon here says, look, Jack was actually hamstrung by the corporate structure, which has always been my theory, right? That he didn't know what was going on. To the best of his knowledge, he was doing things. And it's just typical of the position he was in. It's not even abnormal, right? It's exactly what I would have predicted. So again, I would be open to ideas that Jack did crazy stuff. I'm not shutting my mind to it, right? Just because he's a Bitcoiner, I'm not shutting my mind to it. I just don't see it. I never saw him as that person. I never saw him as the person some of the right-wing folks or right-wing is not even the right way to put it. People who consume too much MAGA media, too much Trump-based media, believe him to be. I've never bought it, don't see it. Could be wrong, but I think what Elon said yesterday is further proof of what I'm saying, which is that he did not understand what was happening. The nature of the company itself meant that he was the least likely to know. Most of the company was designed to keep him in the dark about most of the stuff, right? Like actually. So Elon confirming my bias here with what he says. So that's why I'm bringing it on. You think what you want about Jack Dorsey. I can't solve it. I just know what I see is that, right? Now, you got to leave a bit of wiggle room. You never know anyone. I've met him before, and I don't get that vibe at all. Like, if you spend 2 seconds with the guy, you're not getting the vibe that this is a person in bed with any of these assholes, right? He's not drinking blood. He's not doing any of this stuff. So there you go. But that wasn't the most important thing Elon said. Oh, well, a few more little things he said in the meeting. So he also said, and this is true. This is why we're going to win, guys, by the way. This is it. This is the whole cake here. This is human nature in the smallest, most digestible little bit, and it's why Bitcoiners are going to win, right? You could think it's the laws, it's the changing weapons, it's all of this stuff. No. The left isn't funny. These authoritarian people are not funny. They have not one shred of humor in them. And Elon sort of diagnosed why. He says, if you're premised on a lie, you can no longer be funny because there's no reveal of the truth. Isn't that funny? Isn't that a good way of putting it? I love that. I love that. It's true. They can't meme. Bitcoiners are going to win because we can't stop making jokes. Everything's hilarious. The whole clown world thing. Once you get Bitcoin, everything else seems like a perverted joke, like an absolute stupid, silly theater. And the whole thing is a theater, right? It just becomes obvious that you're watching a theater. You're watching a play. We were talking about it just in the way that the Russian Secret Service has been releasing information on January 6th people and Russian and Mueller report and Russia collusion people, right? They've been sanctioning people to make it look like they're helping Trump, but it's an overt way of just making the American security state basically smell their own pee. It's like what you would do with a dog to teach it a lesson, right? You smell that, right? And they just have to lie again. They have to lie again because of it. And so once you start seeing how all of this works, how all the theater works, it becomes real obvious, and we can make jokes about this stuff. And the other side simply can't, right? It can't make a joke because it's not going to be funny. But all of that said, the most important thing Elon said in the whole meeting, and it feeds into my theory that 2024 US presidential election, the number one subject is going to be Bitcoin. Number one subject. The whole election is turning on the Bitcoin question. And why is that? Why? Let us again thank our lovely Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, oh, dear simulation, thank you for sending us Justin Trudeau. Please send more Justin Trudeau events to help Bitcoin grow and prosper. Because if it wasn't for you, Justin Trudeau, and the simulation for offering him to us, we would not be here today. Now, we got the amazing RFK talk at Bitcoin 2023, all based, his entire orange pill experience based on the trucker protest in Canada. Indeed, I've said it many times, right? It affected me in a sense because anytime you would say, oh, but we come from a Western country, we don't have to deal with this kind of stuff, right? Having it happen to you, I'm telling you, becoming a terrorist is going to be the fastest way to abandon any pretension the old world can survive into the new world, right? It was the absolute end and severing of all ties I had to the fiat world when that happened. Any hope I had of this, easy reconciliation, all out the door, but not in a terrible way, just in a you get rid of the albatross kind of way, right? You see much clearer. And so it was a very positive experience for me. And I said from the very start, this is going to be great. This is going to be, thank you, Justin. Let's go. Let's rock and roll, man. Get into those. Go and get into it, right? So that's a great thing. So Elon yesterday talking about the same thing in the Babylon Bee interview, saying the Ottawa trucker protest was a huge event. And what he describes here is that the free flow of money, exactly from the RFK speech, the free flow of money is as important to a free society as freedom of speech. Now, would you have heard something like that from a presidential candidate or the richest man in the world before the Ottawa trucker protest? I don't think so. It was all hypothetical, right? All of this stuff was hypothetical still. And Trudeau brought it into reality. He brought it into reality, which we love. And we can never stop. We got to build a statue to Trudeau one day. We got to build a statue to him, right? The great orange. We're going to put his stupid socks on the statue and it'll be great, right? If he now, again, right, like my theory that I mentioned at Bitcoin 2023 is that he's going to go down. And I've been saying this since the minute I perceived he was going to win in 2014. The moment I perceived he was going to win, I would say, I think he is going to be the Prime Minister of Canada, but he's going to be such a joke and such a failure that he's going to destroy the political movement globally. Globally, he was going to be such a failure that he would destroy and make not cool everything about the politics that he promotes and espouses. And so he would go down as one of the biggest losers of all time, right? And if the thing with Bobby Kennedy works out, and if you get the Elon Musks of this world and we rewrite history, and indeed the famous photos of World War III are things like the Bitcoin, like the Bitcoin magazine, like the Bitcoin by Bitcoin sign guy, and Bitcoin magazine 2021 show with Bukele and Elon Musk buying Twitter and all of that kind of stuff, right? Then he will go down as the biggest loser. And what I said on the Bitcoin magazine live show at the news desk was that he, good thing he's from Canada because he can apply for MAID and is not going to have to live with the embarrassing truth that he, is the biggest loser in the world. So P-Man, need a dunce cap on that. Yeah, I mean, we'll find a way to make it clowny for sure. It's got to have some kind of clown theme to it. And on the other, he deserves a statue orange instantly on the other side of the planet. I'm telling you, he did everything, and he does deserve a statue. We got to put up a statue for the guy. There's just no way around it, right? Now, it's not like maybe he'll have like the stupid smile or something. Like, it's not supposed to be a reverence thing, right? It's got to be comedy, but we're going to do it. It's going to be the best. We're going to have a great time. Can't wait. Can't wait. So that's what Elon said in that interview. And I thought that was, super interesting and relevant. And indeed, the free money and a free flow of money being a precursor to a free society is super important. And this, going back to this idea that Balaji has, right? They don't have the control. And if they don't have the control, there's no ability to regulate. And if there's no ability to regulate, then innovation can happen absolutely anywhere in the world, right? And it is. Look at this. This is from Brian Rommel today, right? So Brian Rommel, who you all know as the AI guy. Now, I got into him because of AI, but he continues to absolutely surprise me just with the size of his intellect, the stuff he's interested in. He's got this online magazine, and he had a whole article about a month and a half ago on why everyone in the world should run a Bitcoin node in their house and Bitcoin mine in their house. So he's a Bitcoin miner in his house too. So a really interesting person. And here he is talking about an unheralded. So before Bitcoin, I was and remain super interested in batteries, energy capacity, energy systems, nanotech because of its implications for energy. So carbon nanotubes, graphene batteries. This was my sort of pre Bitcoin tech obsession, and the science, right? It's not even a science question anymore. It's sort of an engineering question, like what I was mentioning earlier. They've already handed out the Nobel Prizes for these new batteries and all that. We just haven't gotten commercial applications yet. And so here's one that Brian Rommel has been talking about that I didn't know about. And he says an unheralded metal could become a crucial part of the future. Now, I will warn you, as I said, I've read 10 million of these stories over the last 15 years. About the new battery, the new energy, and just like nuclear fission or fusion or whatever the one that was hard for years was any day now, right? And it didn't come, and it didn't come, and it didn't come. So this could be another one of those. So I'm not saying it is definitely the thing that I hope it is, but it just shows you the type of innovation that's going to be available. So an unheralded metal became a crucial part of the future. Vanadium can be used in new batteries, which can store large amounts of energy almost indefinitely. It's the 22nd most abundant element in Earth's crust. And here's what he says. A Stirling engine with a vanadium battery, no more energy bill. You guys know what a Stirling engine is? Stirling engine is potentially one of the things the skyscrapers, the office buildings, if they ever get empty, will become. So a Stirling engine is just a difference in pressure, and you'll end up getting air. So geothermal can use Stirling engines, right? It's just a difference in air, and the actual movement of the air will turn the turbine and get energy going. So what you can do with a skyscraper, for example, is if you let the air go in the base, because the temperature, just a little bit of difference, right, in pressure and temperature at the top of the skyscraper will cause the air to zoom up to the top, and you can generate energy that way, right? So that's like one of the easiest ways to generate energy. And so what he says here is Stirling, and they've been around forever, right? Stirling engines is not a new thing. This was like a 150-year-old engine, I think, something like that. It's been around for a long time, but we never really got them to the type of scale that we could now, if you can store the energy, because it doesn't produce a ton of energy, but if you can store it, it's enough. So the reason why we're not going to have a social collapse around the world is because, first of all, nobody wants that. Like, even I was at a beautiful American diner yesterday in this corrupt nation, and all the people there were just listening to it was a beautiful sunset, cows in the pasture, happy families all over, and none of these people want to see they don't care about Joe Biden. And they don't care about any of these Woodstock of January 6th Donald Trump stuff, right? These guys just want to be with their families, and that's just in America. Forget about the rest of the world as well. So you get people all around the world, and there are countries that have just come up. They don't want to end now because America can't get its shit together, right? You're going to go tell me all this tons of energy that you see now in Malaysia and Vietnam and Philippines. I saw it firsthand when I lived in Korea. Korea already sort of past the point of all the hard work paying off and them having, sort of a rich, high quality lifestyle, still not evenly distributed. They're still working a little too hard, I would say. But they're not, they sacrifice so much to get to this point. They're not going to be like, oh, fuck, America can't get its shit together, so we're all going to give up, right? Like, it's not going to happen. Now, I understand all innovation did come from America, not necessarily by Americans, but people moving to America using the American system to change the world. That was the formula of the past 80 years. But it doesn't have to be that way anymore. And you're going to get more and more stuff like this. Like I mentioned with, here's what Japan did, right? Japan, now think about this. It's not just AI innovation with Japan. Japan has decided that AI doesn't apply to copyright. Do you know what a boon this is going to be for artists and everything that I was describing just earlier about the future of movies, for example, more or less becoming like music sampling, and you can take like Star Wars and then redo it as Wes Anderson, just using computers, no actors, which we're already seeing hints of as people do this stuff online. What they're saying here is, in Japan, that copyright doesn't apply to AI training. So if they put all this information into the AI in order for it to understand, it's not infringing on any copyrights. Now, there's people who say they're going to try and push that in America, and they're going to put it to rest, right? Put AI's ability to create art to rest because of this. But it's not going to work that way because there's so many other countries in the world. And just as Balaji said, America can't control, therefore can't regulate, therefore things are going to happen abroad. And now, indeed, because the capital is abroad as well, and because there's the internet and we can all access information, we can all iterate on top of each other's innovations. And of course, because we've got Bitcoin, in the end, the US financial system can't ice people out of these innovations because there's going to be ways. So there you go. That's the show for today. And we actually made it. We did not break our connection. I don't know why it was failing before. I mean, I had it up and running for like 2 hours before the show, and I was not making it 15 minutes without it, without the signal getting lost. So a win, everyone. Let's see. Maybe one day after all the clowns are gone, we can start appreciating the greats among us again. Inventors, entrepreneurs, scientists, the people who really advance the human race. Yeah, I think that's immediately in this generation, Bitcoin graffiti. I think the heroes of Bitcoin, not that Bitcoin needs heroes, but the people who fought for it are going to get remembered. And it's sort of, even the image that the AI generated for the icon today, right? Interestingly, one of the main golden age innovations that America had coming out of World War II were the like convertible cars and Mustangs and rock and roll and that whole aesthetic that really defined the 1950s and that early iteration of the golden age, right? The image just generated that for me today, where it's like you have this heart that's now diseased with the old engine, and it put sort of a state symbol on top of the heart as like a patch, versus a heart with Bitcoin on it. And it's let's say it looks like the engine isn't sort of a Rube Goldberg machine. It looks like it actually works, right? So just this idea of celebrating soon the good things that came from the golden age, I think it's natural that things like Bitcoin are going to become mythologized, to use a Bitcoin graffiti word, mythologized, very shortly. And just like the Mustang was mythologized and rock and roll was mythologized one generation ago. So that's what I think. It's going to happen quickly. My GoFundMe donation to the trucker protest got blocked. Was the start of my orange pilling. Look at this is what I'm saying. How many comments, right? Many people. I said it that day. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. We could not have done it without you. I said it couldn't be done. Right? Let's build a giant fist with his head on top. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a clown something, right? It's got to be a clown something. Or we forego the statues and we go back to my plan with Fauci. I think Elizabeth Warren, if we can prove anything with the vaccines and all that, Trudeau, I think it'll be easy, right? I think, by the way, his people say, I heard from pretty good sources that he's getting blackmailed with some sex thing, which I have no proof of, but I heard from credible people that that's why he does so much crazy shit. And if indeed we break this apart, this, blackmailing and the vaccine and all that stuff, Trudeau becomes a pretty good candidate for my little plane ride to space, right? If you guys haven't heard the plane ride to space, I had a vision when I was the last, my kids have had COVID a bunch, but just listening to my little daughter's lungs with COVID last time and wheezing all night, I said, you know what? We got to get the Nuremberg thing going here. And it can't just be like a hanging, or it's got to be public, and public in a way that can compete with the entertainment value that is out there on the internet. So it's got to be something super cool. And if you remember that Red Bull guy who jumped from space, everybody watched that, right? And then you go back and say to Tom Cruise, well, the pharmaceutical industry made you look like a crazy person for saying what you said about it 20 years ago. So you're going to be involved by hosting the public executions. And the public executions are him redoing his halo jumping from Mission Impossible. But just like with the space dropping from space Red Bull guy, he brings like Fauci. And I think Trudeau could be one of those guys. I would watch 10 minutes of him falling. Hang time. You could bet on a target, right? You could put like a maple leaf down somewhere and see if you can hit it, right? You can do all kinds of cool stuff. So now it's just a crazy idea that I had in my own fever dreams around having COVID at the same time as my daughter, and the anger I got from listening to her struggling and suffering with COVID again like that. And anyone who put that thing out there, so there you go. Yeah. So we got to drop him from space. He's a space dropper, right? Send him on the Chinese moon station. Just send him on and make reality. On the moon, I would watch that. I would watch it. As much of a and then he's got to survive on the moon. Oh, he didn't make it. Like Survivor Moon Edition, Moon Terrorists. I would watch. You got to do it that way. All right, team. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming. Hope the broadcast didn't bug out on you. I'm glad it worked. I really didn't have much faith. I thought we were going to have to pull the cord today, but we made it. All right, team. See you tomorrow.